It is my great pleasure to welcome the 2020 UCD Alumni Awardee in Business, Mark Pollock, to address you. As an athlete, explorer, author, everything Mark does is about inspiring people, including himself, to build resilience, to adapt, and to achieve more than sometimes seems possible. Unbroken by blindness in 1998, Mark went on to become the first blind person to race to the South Pole. Then, after a catastrophic spinal cord injury, Mark is now on a new exploration, exploring the intersection between technology and humans. His books and documentaries have given him an important, empathic and compelling voice in the world and on world stages, including TED, Davos, and today, our graduating class of 2021.
Sometimes we choose our challenges, and sometimes challenges choose us. What we decide to do about them, that's what counts. And I'm going to focus on two decision themes. One is whether we decide to be spectators or competitors, and the second, whether we decide to be soloists or collaborators. And before I do that, I want to say well done as you graduate in 2021. My name's Mark Pollock, and I was in Smurfit back in the early 2000s. But let me go back to this point, whether we decide to be spectators or competitors. When I was doing my undergraduate, I could see and I could walk. I was studying for a business studies and economics degree, just about to graduate and go off and get a job in investment banking. And more than that, I was a sportsman, rowing for the university and also for Ireland. I knew exactly who I was and exactly where I was going. And rapidly, in the space of 2 weeks, that changed entirely. I lost my sight and I was no longer involved in university life. I didn't think I'd get a job. I was no longer involved in my crew. In the space of 2 weeks, I not only lost my sight, but I lost my identity. I felt like I was going to have to sit on the sidelines as a reluctant spectator. And over the following 10 years, I became an athlete again, winning silver and bronze medals at the Commonwealth Games, becoming an adventure athlete, and then eventually racing over 43 days in an expedition race to the South Pole, rebuilding my identity as a competitor. And for those 10 years, I felt that being determined enough to being a competitor was what it was all about. A year after getting back from the South Pole, I fell from a second-story window onto the concrete below and broke my back. And it's that experience that revealed that in fact being a collaborator is perhaps even more important. As I lay in hospital for 16 months, I discovered that spinal cord injury strikes at the very heart of what it means to be human. It turned me from my upright running, jumping, cross-country skiing form into a seated compromise of myself. And as I lay there, I found it strange that up to this point in history it had proven to be impossible to find any kind of a cure. Yet we know that history is filled with accounts of the impossible made possible through human endeavour. The kind of human endeavour that took polar explorers to the South Pole at the start of the last century. The kind of human endeavour that will take a new wave of adventurers and explorers to Mars in the early part of this century. So I started asking myself, well, why can't that same human endeavour cure paralysis in our lifetime? And thankfully, based on some of the people that we have started to work with, we found that perhaps it could. People working in robotics at Exobionics in San Francisco, electrical stimulation at UCLA in Los Angeles. And over the last number of years, we've brought those people together to help them collaborate to achieve more. I've walked over 1.5 million steps in my robot. I could voluntarily move my legs with the electrical stimulation. And we created collaborations worth €15 million to help us on that endeavour to cure paralysis. But despite working with world-class competitors, it was the lack of collaboration that concerned me. And as I reflect on the South Pole race and the stories that inspired me to go there, despite the personalities like Shackleton, Scott and Amundsen that were involved, it was never a story of individual leaders, individual heroes. It was always a story about collaboration. And now, as I reflect on the work we're doing to cure paralysis in our lifetime, it's very clear that no individual scientist or technologist or philanthropist or investor is going to cure that problem on their own. It's going to be, again, a story of people working together to achieve more. So, as you graduate in 2021, perhaps it's worth reflecting on this idea of whether we decide to be competitors or whether we decide to be collaborators. And I'll remind you of what I said in the beginning. Sometimes we have the luxury of choosing our challenges, and sometimes challenges choose us. What we decide to do about it, that's what counts. And I would suggest that you remain determined to compete. But perhaps more importantly, you become brave enough to collaborate. Well done, and thank you.
My warmest thanks to Mark for those inspirational words.